Welcome everybody. This is our next in a series of how to fix old things around your old house, sponsored by the Old House Owners Workshops, which is part of the Historic Preservation Commission here in Kalamazoo. What I want to show you today is how to turn painted hardware, nasty old, lots of layers of paint all over it, into beautiful stripped hardware where you can see all the beautiful detail from the Victorian era or the Craftsman era or whenever it happened. So we're going to show you an easy technique. It's relatively inexpensive, not very dangerous, and we want to make sure that you can do it yourself at home. So one of the things you need to start with is when you get a piece of painted hardware, you need to determine, first of all, whether it's really metal, because the process we're going to teach you has to do with hot water. So if you used hot water to treat these knobs, for example, you could destroy them because these are actually a wood composite material from the 19th century. They're very handsome, but this is one of the few places where your better choice might be an orange paint stripper or something like that rather than the heat technique we're going to show you today. So first, make sure what you have is metal. Number two, because of the fact that this paint, 99% chance, probably has at least one layer that has lead in it, you want to be sure that you're using lead-safe work practices. Lead was a good addition to paint for a lot of reasons. It's a natural microbicide, it is very tough, it's easy to keep it clean, and it holds its color very well. However, it's also a neurotoxin. So we really want to avoid getting it inside our bodies in any way, either as ingesting it by accidentally eating it or swallowing it, or by breathing it in. So we want to be sure that we're nice and neat. And you'll see here in our work table, we've got a layer of plastic, then we've got newspapers, then we've got another layer of plastic just to make it look nice. Anything that you use when you are doing this should be something that you throw away at the end. Not maybe throw away, do throw away. This will have lead in it. I'm going to be using this old placemat to work on. This is going to go in the trash because if you took it back and you washed it in your washing machine, now you're contaminating your washing machine. And we really, really don't want to do that. So the process is basically very simple. What you're going to be doing is cooking your hardware in a crock pot. I recommend very strongly that you look for an oval-shaped crock pot. Get yourself down to Goodwill or a yard sale or whatever and get yourself an old oval-shaped crock pot. You will never cook in this again ever for the rest of your life unless you hate the people you're cooking for. As you can see on this one that we've actually heated up, we've got the poison stickers on it just to remind you that this is not something you ever want to cook in again. But you take your crock pot, you take the hardware that you want to strip, just put it in the bottom of the crock pot, add some water. Some people also like to add a little bit of dish soap or something like that also. I have never had a better outcome using dish soap. I think it might keep your crock pot cleaner if that's something you're concerned about. You just put it in the crock pot, plug your crock pot in, then depending on how long until you want to start working on it, it may be 4 hours, it may be 6 hours, it may be overnight. If it's overnight, you can just leave it on warm and then turn it up a little higher the next morning. The group that I have been cooking today, I started at 8 o'clock this morning, and so they cooked for about 6 hours. And when we get in there, you'll see how that works. So you just put the water in, put the cover on, turn it on, and just walk away. You want to be sure you're leaving it somewhere where children can't get to it or curious animals, because again, the paint that is being boiled off here or that is being loosened here is a neurotoxin. So you just want to be very careful of that. Now, lead does not dissolve in water, but it can come off into little flakes and little pieces that can be, they could be ingested or something out of the water. It's not as easy as you think it might be. It cannot be absorbed through your skin, which is a really good thing. So this is how you would start it. You would get yourself an old crock pot, put the metal that you want to strip inside it, add some water, a little bit of dish soap if you want to, turn that baby on, and then go watch, oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes of Breaking Bad, and then you can come back and actually get started on things. Now these are the ones, this is the crock pot that we have been cooking since this morning after I finished breakfast. So when you're getting in here, keep in mind that at one point in time, this was really, really hot in here. When I first picked up this crock pot at home to bring it down here to the studio, It was literally boiling, okay? So you want to be very careful and make sure you're not just sticking your hands into hot water. So I use this old pair of pliers I keep with my paint stripping stuff, and I just lift out. This is a hinge, not unlike this really pretty one here. And then I also have a flat door plate, which I thought would make an especially dramatic peel, because once the metal has heated behind the paint, you can literally just peel it off. Sometimes it just comes off like a Band-Aid. It just peels away. I'm going to puncture one of the bubbles here. As you can see, the water is just spreading out from underneath, but the paint just peels off. Now this is a smooth door plate, so this is going to be super easy. Once you get the paint off, this is just going to be a light buffing with some steel wool, and then either you can clear coat it, or what I like to do is use an oil just to keep it from rusting again in the future. You want to be sure that when you're doing this work, you are not using pointy tools, because you could scratch the metal. Once you get it all loosened up and everything, I really recommend that you use things like toothpicks. So this is a more ornate hinge, and I don't know if it's, yes, see, this is just coming off. This is the way I love it, when it just comes off like this. And it just peels away because the paint has stripped behind it. One of my friends was telling me on Facebook a couple days ago that he used to do it this way, and his dad used to do it this way, and his dad would keep a pot of ice water, and after, when you first take it out, he would just plunge it right in the ice water, and he said it would come off even more effectively. I haven't tried that yet, so I didn't want to necessarily tell you to do that. Plus, I had enough with boiling things to get down to the studio here. So you can see that that paint has just come right off very nicely. I'm going to dry it off a little bit so we can kind of get more of a look at it. Remember, anything that you are going to use on this project, like rags, I'm using paper towels because they are disposable. You're not going to keep them. They can just go in the regular trash. You don't have to take them to a special hazardous waste site or anything. You can just clean it up, and you can see how pretty that is. That's a beautiful bronze pattern in there. Now you can use, at this point, you can use either your toothpicks to get into the little cracks and get more of the paint out into the little spaces. And they actually will work quite well. And of course, they're totally disposable. You can also use non-metallic brushes like this. Sometimes I find these are a little bit of a problem because as you brush, sometimes you're squishing the paint more into a crack than you would have otherwise. But either way, you want it to be the non-metallic. You want it to be the plastic so you don't end up scratching the surface on it. Okay? So we also have got a couple more pieces in here. You can also do the handles for your windows. Those usually strip very easily, literally just like taking off an old Band-Aid or something. So once you get the paint off, as much as you can. Now if this cools off a little bit too much and you can see there's more paint that you want to get off, just put it right back in the crock pot, turn it back on, let it soak for another couple hours, and then all of it should come off. You may need to go through something 2 or 3 times, but it's going to get it all off. Now the reason I recommend this technique rather than using a chemical stripper is because chemical strippers can easily change the color of the metal underneath. You get this beautiful bright color here, or this brassy color here, or even a nice black like this cast iron hinge, and it can change the color, and not unusually it can change the color unevenly, so it looks all splotchy afterwards. So when you're done with the stripping and getting all the paint off that you want, the next step, and these are ones that we've stripped in the past, is you just give it a good buffing with some steel wool until you get it to the level where you are happy with the look on it. Now you may need to rinse it off, wash it off, wipe it off a few times because of course you're raising a little bit of dust, not to mention the steel wool dust that you've got going here. So you're going to want to get it clean. This one has been cleaned up a little bit more. And you don't want it to look bright. You don't want it to look like you just bought it from a blister pack at Lowe's. You want to leave a little bit of that patina there. So don't worry about trying to get it absolutely perfectly clean and bright. But once you get it buffed up to the way that you want it to look, and you're comfortable with that, so you can see how much just getting that last little bit off, that can make a really, really big difference in the look. And it just looks, this is a beautiful piece. I don't know what this would cost from one of the restoration hardware stores, but this is beautiful and it's authentic and it's really nice. So once you get as much of that residue off, the leftover gunk from being in the pot and everything else, and you're ready to do your final coat, like I said, I really prefer using a linseed oil rather than using shellac or a varnish or something like that, just because it's so much of a permanent. There we go. How to open the container. There we go. Just take it, put it on a paper towel. Again, with linseed oil and with any kind of oil, you want to be sure that you dispose of these properly, because then not only do you have the possibility of lead, but then you've got the joy of spontaneous combustion. And you just oil it. Just rub the oil in, just like that. And then you can take off, if there's extra, you can just rub it off. And this will keep it in the same way that putting a clear coat on or anything else. This will keep it from rusting. And every few years, if you want to, even after you've remounted it back on the door, you can just do it again. Put a little bit more oil on it, rub it in good, and then wipe off the excess, and you've got another 5, 7, 8 years of protection just from that oil. It's something that's renewable, does not have to be stripped after a few years, and you are ready to move on. So there's a few steps here. You start with a crock pot, an oval crock pot that will take the large door plates, because you want something that's big enough to hold something like this. This is a very common thing you'll want to be stripping. Door plates and hinges, so you want something that's big enough. The round ones are great, but you're not going to be able to get the long pieces in. Water, maybe a little bit of dish soap if you want to in there. Turn it on warm for overnight, medium or high during the day, and just get it nice and hot. Make sure you give it, I'd say, about a minimum of 3 hours or so on high. You can also do this on a hot plate, but do not do it in your kitchen. You do not want any possibility of any of those lead fumes or lead residue or drops or anything else being anywhere near food that you are going to be preparing. So don't do it in your kitchen. Get a hot plate out in the garage, and then you can boil it right there, you know, on your hot plate on top in the garage. Again, don't ever use it for cooking in again, whether you're boiling it in an old pot or whether you're doing it in a crock pot. So those are the steps. It's not expensive. It's pretty common that you can find a used crock pot for between $5 and $10 at a lot of resale places. You can even buy a new one if you want to, I guess. And then the rest of it is steel wool, a few tools that you have around the house, anything that you think might be really good for picking paint out of little tiny fancy spaces, which could be popsicle sticks, it could be toothpicks like this. Sometimes you can even use dental tools if you're very careful not to scratch too much. And then just get the paint off, buff it down a little bit with some steel wool, and then oil it, and you are done, and you have beautiful hardware looking like it came off the rack at the hardware store in 1895. Thank you, everybody, for watching the Old House Owners Workshop's presentation on how to strip the paint off your old hardware. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for joining us. Please follow us on Facebook at OHOW, Old House Owners Workshop.